I think.
I mean, I'm okay.
All right. All right, so we were all talking about all that we were talking about is what happened prior to the meeting. What I prepared, what Mr. Dawson and I discussed, what we had to take to the table when they came in. So when they come in, just to give you an idea of what happens then is with Dibbles and K1 and 2 for part of the year, they don't take tests online, so I have to prepare a packet for them so they have the information that they need. They submit it to me, and then I put it together. And I usually lead the discussion concerning like the grade level results. We look at the standards because that's all pretty cut and dry there. And then this is the piece that's happened more recently. Is the teachers work together to analyze their own data and develop a plan with assistance from the principal and the coach. And that is changing all the time how we're doing that. We want to make our teachers more independent in their being able to analyze their data, understand their data, and change their data on their own. And Mr. Dawson is there, and he either approves or tweaks their plan, and then he addresses the talking points that we prepared. So we look at the data first, and then he addresses the points that we talked about together. And the meeting that I showed you, the one that we were looking at and had a big discussion of all the talking points, this is what was decided. It's not necessarily it's not a dictatorial thing. We go in and we talk to them. This is the group that does not say very much at all. So it's kind of hard to get them involved. But the reading club, somebody asked me about that. That is where we take the kids and divide them up into groups according to their needs, and for 30 minutes a day or however long I think they're going to do it, an hour, do this. First grade, the kids go to a different teacher and get a specific skill set for a certain amount of time each day. And that's new, coming this year. We'll see how that goes. The teachers set their AR goals. They wanted the kids to have 3 points the first and the second 9 weeks, and 5 points the third 9 weeks, and they were going to see what they wanted for the last 9 weeks. Because generally what we've seen with our first grade kids, we used to have a pretty strong ongoing AR program at our school. For different reasons, it kind of went by the wayside for a year or two, and then we saw, you know what, we really, really need to bring it back. But what we've seen with our first graders is it's kind of a struggle to get them to read it at the beginning, but then once they figure it out, they take off like a lightning bolt, and they're reading everything they can get their hands on. And often first grade, we had a set goal per classroom and a little celebration if they made it. Every first grade teacher made their goal because the kids loved it and read so much. Yes.
Can I ask a question just for consistency across the system? What are your other goals, like at Forest Hills or Harlan? Just so that I'll know, as our 5th grade teachers make their plans for AR and all, what do they have? Is that like a standardized grade level that they want to have a certain number of points, or how's that go? Do you know how many it is?
We've changed the goals this year.
Do you know Jessica? Okay, I'm sorry.
I can do
that.
it,
I was just curious, just for our reference point, to know what they had been doing so that we would know.
Well, ours was different for each grade level. Like I said, we did that for a few years, and then we stopped it for, I don't remember if it was one, maybe just this past year. Yes, just this past year we didn't do it. And now we've decided, you know what, we've got to revisit it, and we've got to get the people that weren't on board with it on board, because it's for the kids. An independent reading that they're doing is for their benefit.
Amy, if I can ask a question just so I can have an equal perspective from each elementary school. I've had the advantage of being at Forest Hills and then at Harlan for a year. I definitely recognize that time reading on your instructional level increases your vocabulary and therefore increases your level, brings about the independence. How does AR reading and goal setting play a role during the instructional day, 8 to 3? Or is that primarily done when they are finished in a small group and they have some time to read, is it primarily done at home? I know you don't have a huge home support, so how much of the instructional day does it take up? And I have a reason for asking that.
I think what most teachers do is the reading teachers, when they're in reading, then they have a time for them to read like a certain, in their small group, that group will be reading AR books.
Gotcha, okay.
And
So
some
it's
of them
kind
have
of
a
used
year.
as a rotation, a station, and then, you know, Forest Hills has the ability for students to be more successful in taking that home and reading at night. One concern that I do have, and I did not have it at Harlan, I will tell you that I do have it as a concern at Forest Hills. Some of the teachers block off time for AR each day. That is instructional time lost. If they're teaching small group reading and kids are AR reading in a station, then that's a good use of instructional time. But if I've got 45 minutes blocked off where every kid in my room is AR reading, and they're just bringing it to me to sign off their folder, that is a waste of instructional time in my opinion.
And some of them would do after their test.
Yeah,
Like after they
yeah.
finish their reading or their math test, they could get an AR book and read, but not, I don't know of any.
So, I mean, I would just challenge all of our principals to look at your schedules, and if a teacher has a 45 block minute of time, AR reading, that's a red flag to me.
I've got a question. Do they get a grade for AR reading or no? Is the AR reading done just for the purpose of improving your reading?
They do factor in some grades in 3rd and 4th
Ours is
grade.
more comprehension. It's, you know, when we're looking at, not so much meaning points, but it's comprehension. It's 80 or above.
And I think
So
sometimes
they
they
get
don't
counted as a daily grade?
They got a
They-
grade.
They do count,
I saw
they do use some
and
of
I
it.
think that's.
They get grades. Every grade on AR that Lucy takes this year counted in her
Okay.
reading grade.
Okay. Yeah, Hibbett's.
Give it grades. They have to stay over 85%. Is that what you?
Yes, and I would say that we have, maybe not consistently, but we do sporadically have some teachers that are setting a goal of, say, 15 points for a 9 weeks, and your grade is based on whether you make that goal or not. It's not on the 85% comprehension, and to me, that is off base for AR. So I think that's something for our elementary principals and possibly Hibbett to at least monitor in lesson plans, because we're trying too hard to squeeze things in to set aside 45 minutes for me to sit at my desk and let you come up and sign your folder when you're ready to test.
And to my knowledge, teachers at Wheaton do not count this as a grade unless perhaps it was a novel that they read and at the end of it they took an AR test. It might be a daily grade. To my knowledge, that's all, yes.
You know, I'm on the upper end of the spectrum as well. I'm a lower end mind wise, but upper end of the spectrum in terms of who I serve. But I'm just wondering, I'm just going to pose this question out there because I've read some things, and you know, I always thought the way to fix our problem in high school was to get an elementary reading teacher hired to work in the high school with the kids who have this problem. But I've learned that that's not necessarily a cure-all either. But I'm wondering, in relationship to teaching reading, I'm hearing what Ann's saying over there about 45 minutes of a block. Do teachers in the elementary areas, do they intertwine the reading with the social studies? Because I've heard stories of teachers that don't do social studies at all because they got to focus on the reading. And I'm thinking to myself, as a former social studies teacher, you know, where I'm trying to teach them how to read for inferences, read to identify opinion and that kind of thing, how win-win that could be if they were teaching the reading in the social studies, and you get more bang for your buck in relationship to what you're doing.
Science too.
And as
Right.
I say, as a former science teacher, that, to me,
Well, I'm only
To
partial to
to-
social
to
studies.
know-
I don't make sense.
It is.
to neglect the science to, you know, would be, that is a shame, since so many of our jobs for the future are science oriented, to not have that background. Yeah, since, let me say that one more time, since so many of the jobs are science oriented.
Social studies rules it all.
K1 and 2, the instruction is very integrated across the content areas, and that is our best bang for the buck. It's where the kids truly get an understanding and are able to apply the skills, which basically is what CCRS is all about, is being able to apply what you learn. I will tell you a hindrance to that I see at differing elementary schools, differing grades, and Tracy, you can speak to hit it. Where that becomes a problem is where, and I'm not saying that we should not departmentalize or team teach. You can make it work and integrate with departmentalization and with team teaching, but it takes much more effort. And so where you see team teaching, where you see departmentalization, it is much more difficult for them to do that because I don't teach reading, I teach science, and we're also bound to a schedule. I have them for 45 minutes and then we gotta change, so my math teacher can have them for 45 minutes. And so at the elementary levels, I see those things being barriers. It is not to say that it can't be done, but it takes great effort and I think monitoring from an administrative level. And I talked with some teachers at the ELA benchmarking session last week, and they said, we just could not get it all in. And I asked them legitimately, I said, could you have gotten it in if you had had 8 to 3 with your own kids, and knowing that you've got a science lesson today where you can carry over your ELA standard and weave that into that, could you have gotten it done? Yeah, but you know, it was 9:45 and I had to swap and give them to Miss So-and-so. And then that ELA teacher never has the opportunity in that day to weave it back through the other content areas. And that is a concern of mine. It can be done. Now, I know Wheaton is making great progress and y'all are departmentalized in third and fourth or fourth? Third and fourth. It can definitely be done, but that makes it more challenging. And you've really got to have a team that works cohesively that says, yes, I teach science, but I'm willing to weave this skill into my science instruction and integrate.
And if I may say, when I was at Harlan, we were departmentalized, and we've got to make sure that our team is doing that. But it wasn't, I teach social studies, I teach these kids. And I taught reading standards through social studies every single day. That was our goal, and that's how we got to keep departmentalized, because we promised Dr. Coker they're not going to lose any of their reading skills. We're going to strengthen their reading skills because we're going to do it through science and social studies also.
Well,
And we
and
did.
I just think
So-
back as a high school science teacher, one of the first things that I did after I became aware of the reading issue that we had in our school when I was in the classroom is that before the end of the first week of class, I had every child read to me one-on-one. And now, if you can get them to read to you and you can get them to write by the secondary level, then you're set. You know what you're working with. So, but it's just, it lends itself, I guess I'm just thinking the resources that you could pull that would have the science.
You're right.
And then, to me, they just marry. And I know social studies is so much, because we hear that from, the kids are saying, oh, there's so much reading in social studies. You know, it's just, if you use those resources, you could
It's
do.
perfect. It
Yeah.
takes a great team effort to make that happen. I think they are making that happen at Wheaton. But the team teaching or the departmentalization at the elementary level is a barrier to us being able to do that. And as administrators, we just have to monitor, inspect what we expect to make sure that it's happening. But yes, that is ideal. And
Just like
I think Tracy's had some issues with people saying, I don't teach reading,
I think
things like
reading is
that, so
happening.
it's a barrier.
Okay, back to here. This is our group that is very, very quiet. I mean, you say things to them and they're, and you ask them a question and they're, and at this meeting, when this thing was thrown out, it was like, ah! So, very interesting. We told them that the weekly reading test passages will be read independently from the beginning of the year. But what they came up with, they did start talking, because they're like, they can't do it. They can do it. Look at the text. This is the test. And it was like 3 sentences the first week. 3 sentences. And some pictures. And they asked questions about the pictures. And they said, oh. So when they saw it, they thought, well, yeah, they really should be able to do that. And then, but what they And their argument was, the questions are sometimes tricky, or the kids don't know the words in the questions, which, okay, I could understand that very well and agree with that. And Mr. Dawson did also. So they said, if they read the passage, can we read the questions? So we did agree that they will read the questions and answers to the students the first 9 weeks. Then we'll wean back and maybe they'll just read the questions to the students the second 9 weeks. And the third 9 weeks, the kids are on their own. And interestingly enough, our title teacher, Martha Eves, who's for kindergarten, ran off the first grade test and presented it to our kindergartners in the last 2-3 weeks of school. Other than the children we were holding back or that also already identified for special ed, every single child passed that test with flying colors. I mean, it wasn't any, there weren't 60s. I think there were 2 70s. Everybody they might have missed a question, or maybe 2. They could do it, which is what we have come to the conclusion that we can't baby them too much. We've got to let them independently do everything that they can. And if they can read this, we've got to let them do that so that they can strengthen their skills. So that's what we'll see what happens.
You know,
next
and
year.
yet, that's so funny because you expected them, we expect you to do well on this test, and they did well. And that's sort of like, Becky goes into special ed too with our kids. You know, sometimes we sell them out too soon. We need to give them some opportunities to try some things on their own. And you know, and if we need to go think about how we can, you know, go back in with those accommodations or whatever at that point. But if they have those experiences, they might be able to progress and do some major things.
Mhm.
And so that's kind of another mindset that we're working with as well, you know.
And that's a culture that has to be built in the school, and I believe that's happening more and more in our schools, that we believe the kids can and expect them to do, and they're rising up. Just like the teachers, we believe that they can, we expect that they do, and they will also. Progress monitoring. We had said they've used McGraw-Hill. They asked, do we have to use McGraw-Hill, or can we just use grade level passages? So that was a point we conceded, Mr. Dawson would have conceded to, yes. But the other things remain the same. So they got to choose some things on their own. They argued for some things, and it was agreed upon, and it was changed. So this is what I emailed to the academic leaders and the whole team after the data meeting, so they know this is what's happening next year. And probably at the beginning of the year, I will send this out again to remind them, remember, this is what we agreed upon in May. So this is what needs to happen. So, all right, now, the second kind of data meeting that we'll have is that we set the stage, coach and the principal, and the teachers do most of the work. And this was new. I think we began to do this last year, to build leadership and understanding of data in our teachers. It has really grown so much since we handed it over to them. This is an example of a data meeting worksheet. This happened on the October 31st meeting. It was the first time we tried it. We had them look at their math and their reading benchmark. This one is just, I just have math on here just to streamline it. But we gave them copies of their test, which is very important to have during the data meeting. Because they'll say, well, they all missed number 16. Well, if we don't know what number 16 says, we can't figure out why they missed it. Was it a poorly written question? Did you not address that very well? What happened? Why did they miss it? We always have copies of the test on hand.
Let me throw this out too. If they're taking them in Global, you can have those electronically or paper. I mean, because technically when you're looking through your pieces on Global, if they all have it pulled up, they can all pull up each question, or they can have paper copies.
Okay, so, and then give them their grade level results. Now, this was the first time, so Mr. Dawson, before they got started, we had the whole school in there because it was the one where we were at once high school, that PD day or half a day that we had. And we explained to them what we wanted them to do. So they were to find their grade levels 2 highest scoring objectives and what did they do the best on, and then the lowest 2 objectives. And then they were to look at the lowest two and brainstorm 3 strategies that they, as a grade level, can implement to fill gaps during the second 9 weeks, to remediate and work on these strategies. So what they chose to do is this, and they did every bit of this together. They would come and ask questions, but they found that their highest math objective was students can use pictures to solve addition problems, and students can relate counting to addition. That's what they did. They were strong in. But what they needed to work on were fact families and determining true-false equations, which are important things, so we needed to continue that. So the strategies, they were going to use the words the same as instead of equals in their math vocabulary, so that they know that what's on one side of the equation is the same as what's on the other. So is it a true or false? They were going to review their strategies in their weekly math centers. You know, they have centers set out on certain skills so the kids could complete their work and the teachers could look over that. And when they called them back to the small group, they would bring their work they had done in small group to them, and they could look over it and just really quick say, oh, well, Susie and Jimmy and Billy have it, but Kathy still needs work. And so she knows how to adjust her instruction from them. And use student models and manipulatives to strengthen students' understanding of the skills and concepts. And they would probably do that individually or with us in a small group. So we gave this to them, and we thought it was great. And then later on, Mr. Dawson and I were talking, and he can go in and look at their centers and see if they do, but how do we know that Billy and Bobby and Susie and Kathy can now meet these standards? They now are stronger in fact families, or the whole class, whatever that was doing it. So the next thing that he and I talked about was adding an accountability piece. So this was another step forward. So later in the year, after they would do these activities with us in the data meetings, we added this, and so I put 2 standards here, but you could do 1. You don't want to do too many. But so I put here, you know, fact families and determining true false will increase from, okay, so I'm just 10 out of 17 were proficient in this when they took it, let's say. So we want 15 out of 17, and for whatever reason, we know that there were a couple of students who were strugglers that weren't going to be able to do that. Will increase by this date, and they set the date, and they also set the number of students. They know their class, so they determined if I had 10 out of 17, I think that with this remediation I'm going to do, I can have 15 out of 17 to pass this standard. And this is by the date, as measured by paper and pencil assessment. You could do it on, you could do it online, you could do it however you wanted to do it. But what I did was sit down with the academic leader, and we came up with just a couple of quick little things. I might have gone in, and if it was reading or whatever, I could say, what's the medial sound in nip? And the child said nip. I got that. Just a quick check. It could be 2 questions. It could be a problem. And it really wasn't a got you. But when I'm a teacher, and I would go into those data meetings, and you walk out and go, whew, I'm glad that's over with. I'm going to go back into my 4 walls. I'm going to teach the next unit. And then when you get the email from the coach, hey, we're having a data meeting about this. Oh, what was it we were supposed to be doing? That's what happens. What was it we were supposed to be doing? And then they figure it out, and they do a little something about it before they come to the next meeting. So we thought this was a way that hopefully we could keep that on their mind. Hey, I've got to do this because we're going to check it. And it gets them more involved also because they want their kids to succeed. And I don't mean when I said they go back in the room and close the door and continue on to the next unit, that they don't want them to master those standards, but they have so much to do that if you don't have some kind of accountability to see how that progress is coming along, then it's more than likely not going to be done. So You have any comments about that?
I think it's a good plan.
All right, and then we have some individual meetings, and these are really, grade level meetings are sometimes tough. At the end of the day, when I've had the whole school rotate through my room in a grade level meeting, I am exhausted. There's just it's very challenging. Mr. Westbrook can speak to that.
She's exhausted. She does a lot of work. I can speak to that.
But it's a little bit different in that we still meet, and I email out an agenda to them, and I post a sign-up sheet like in the teacher workroom. So they can come in. It doesn't have to be during the regular grade levels PE time, but usually that's the time they choose. They come in for 10 or 15 minutes, so it's short. We tell them whatever they need to have with them, and they prepare that to bring to us. During the meeting, they sit down, we discuss it, they give us their target, and we set a goal and a timeline again. And after the meeting, I email the outcomes to them individually, or if they bring it down on a piece of paper, I keep the paper, make a copy, put it back in their box. And again, the principal monitors the progression of goals. The advantages of the individual meeting: the teacher must participate. They're the only one in the room other than Mr. Dawson, so you are going to hear them talk. The time frame is shorter and more flexible. If a teacher is absent, you know how they're absent sometimes for grade level meetings, if they're not there on that day, they say, "Oh, well, I missed the meeting." They do. Right, I'm sure they do. Or they have, sometimes, this was a problem for us. We had a parent come in today, and at our school, if a parent's coming in, you really want to meet with them. So they would miss the whole meeting or part of the meeting or whatever to be with the parent. The environment is kind of non-threatening. You know, Mr. Dawson is really he's not intimidating to the teachers, and I don't think I am either. So it's pretty non-threatening. They come in, they're relaxed, and all the teachers have an input. Everybody has a voice, and they decide what's going to happen in their classroom with us. So it has a lot of advantages. It's very flexible. You don't have, if the teacher's absent, we can do it next week for 10 minutes. It's a good way to do it. Sometimes you need grade level, but sometimes this is nice. The disadvantage, of course, is they don't have the opportunity to collaborate with their colleagues. However, if I have heard what their colleagues were saying and they've had similar problems, I can share those strategies, or we might have developed some strategies of our own prior to the meeting. And this is an example of something that I gave to them prior to them coming in. One of our meetings was a Global Scholars meeting. So they were to choose, and we told them just pick a couple, and some of them want 9. You know, they'll just 9 kids will be scrolled all over to the side, but overachievers. So they would pick their student and what, if it was math class or whatever, the area of concern, their gain or their loss, once the gain's goal met, and new and additional strategies to help them improve. We did this at mid-year. Global Scholars does not have a chart for gains goals at mid-year, but I made one. What I did was just take the in-year goal, divide it in half, and the teachers could look and see, did they make their goal at mid-year or not, and how far they had to go to meet that goal. And it was a good meeting. We did not have really an accountability piece tied to it other than Global Scholars is going to happen again. But it did, with Global being kind of new still, and we're all trying to figure out how to look at the data and analyze it and what we need to look at and how we need to do it. It was a good thing to do individually, and it was a good meeting. And that's about, all I have for you today. That's how we do our meetings in elementary. Do you have questions?
Can you email that to Mr. Westbrook?
Yes.
Comments?
Good job.
Very good.
Thank you. Next, we'll have Mrs. Flowers. She wants to